Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Gary Cohen. I'm the CEO of Botanical Solutions. We're a full-service extraction company. So you might wonder, why is the CEO of a full-service extraction company talking about selling hemp and CBD to retailers and preparing to navigate that? Because that's our topic this afternoon. It's because in my prior life, I spent 30 years selling to all the big box retailers where you shop. That was my career for, like I said, well over 30 years. So I'm here to share with you some of what I've learned over those 30 years and what it really takes to be successful to sell into these big retailers. So selling to big box retailers sounds really appealing, right? You think about the dollars and the volume and the number of stores that they have. And you recognize the names up there, and that's just a small sampling. So it sounds great, right? And it is great, but it's not without risk. So I want to share with you what the best practices are so that you can maximize your opportunities for success when you go into those big boxes. So here's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. We're going to talk about preparing your company to sell to big box retail. We're going to talk about developing a targeted customer strategy. Underline the word targeted, because every one of these retailers is different, and your strategy will be different based on that particular retailer. Creating a strategic plan. You must have a strategic plan. This is the big leagues. This is the major leagues. Okay, this is not the minor leagues anymore. So you've got to be ready with a strategy. Account management. You have to understand how you manage accounts of this magnitude. It's very difficult, and it requires a lot of resources, a lot of time, and so forth. So you have to be prepared for that. How do you manage the category? If you're fortunate enough to get placement into a big box retailer, guess what? You're the one who has to manage the category in that retailer, not them. So that might come as a surprise to some of you who have never done business with big boxes. But they require you to manage the inventory. They require you to manage the category. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Replenishment. We're going to talk about replenishing your inventory in the stores, and we're going to talk about integration of the supply chain. This is really important when you're dealing with big box retail. It might not be important when you're dealing with small retailers. Certainly, there's no issue when you're selling direct to consumer. And lastly, we're going to talk about reporting and analytics. All big retailers today is based on decisions that come from analytics. Okay, they don't make decisions without analytics. So let's keep that in mind. We're going to talk about that further too. So let's start with that first topic, preparing to sell to big box retailers. Before you make an appointment or even attempt to make an appointment with a big box retailer, please be prepared to meet the expectations of that retailer. So they work at such a different pace than smaller retailers, independent retailers, small chains. It's very different with these big box retailers. They move at lightning speed. Think about your branding and your packaging, okay? Now, you might want to go in with a different brand than you currently have because you want to manage your channel. So for example, if you are currently selling CBD products online, which we call D2C, direct to consumer, okay, if you go into a big box retailer, the waters can get a little bit muddy. You follow me? When you're selling direct to consumer. Now, if you were a brand like Tylenol, okay, then you could, if you wanted to, like Nike, there's a local brand. Let's talk about Nike. Nike can sell direct to the consumer on their website, but they can also sell to all the big retailers that carry athletic shoes. Why? Because they're Nike. But for pretty much any of the CBD packaged products today, the retailers are not going to like that, okay? Because they don't have to carry your brand. They can carry lots of different brands. They could go with their own private label brand. Okay, they're not going to tolerate that. And that's because you don't yet have the brand equity that you need. And that's okay. Okay, you're building your brand equity. But right now, that's not going to happen. So you've got to think about that. You might want to go in with a different brand. So just something to think about. D2C, direct to consumer, versus B2B, which selling to the big boxes. It's a very different model. When you're selling direct online, and I would say the vast majority of CBD retail products out there, those companies started direct to consumer online, right? Most of them are selling directly online to the consumer, which means there is no middle person there. There's no middle company. It's all margin from the price that they sell to that consumer. But when you're selling to a big box retailer, okay, they've got to be able to turn around and sell it. So you've got your margin, then they've got to turn around and sell it. And by the way, their margins are usually about 60% in this category. 60, tie. So you've got to work backwards, right? What you've got to do is you've got to look at what should the retail be in that store. Let's back out the margin that the retailer needs. That means that's the price we have to sell it to them for. And then what does that leave you with? Does everybody follow that? So you've always got to work backwards. And by the way, if they want to carry a private label, they're going to look for an 80% gross margin. Okay, 80%. And aside from making an 80% gross margin, they're going to want the retail to be at least 15% below the brand. Okay, so you've got to keep that in mind. So this is not simple. It's not easy. You've got to have a very efficient operation. You've got to build scale, because with scale, you get economies out of that. Okay, so these are all the things you have to think about. Now, what are the non-negotiables, okay, for these big box retailers? Well, certainly the GMP certification, but many of you are familiar with GMP, but I want you to think about this. You need to go for the higher level dietary supplement certification, not the more common standard food certification. Most people are getting food certification. You're going to have to go higher to dietary supplement. As soon as a Walmart or a Target or a CVS or a Walgreens wants to go national with your line, okay, they've got liabilities. Okay, you can be a liability to them. They have to have control of that upstream supply chain, and they're going to require these high-level certifications. So make sure you're working on that if you don't have it already. By the way, you'd probably also want to look at a kosher certification, okay, because a lot of retailers really want to see that as well. Okay, they want to serve the masses. Okay, so it's something else you might want to consider. They are going to require complete stewardship of the upstream supply chain. So what do I mean by that? If you are a bottler and packager of a retail CBD product, they don't want to hear that you have control just over what you do. They want to know that you have control of the entire upstream supply chain. Okay, that would mean whoever's processing for you to create your CBD, okay, and all the way through the farm, okay, where is that hemp being grown, okay, what are the standards for the hemp being grown, and so forth. And a little later, I'm going to talk to you about some of the technology that you're going to have to embrace so that that can be tracked all the way back to the seed that's first planted. Okay, this is something that you're really going to need to understand. Okay, do you have the capacity to handle the volume that you're going to get? Okay, because it's pretty amazing how fast that ramps up. Now, these chains are generally not, if you went to, say, Walmart, they're not going, if they love what you show them, I mean, if they absolutely say, wow, your packaging's great, your pricing's great, and believe me, the first time they're not going to tell you everything's great. In fact, they'll never tell you everything's great. They'll find something to pick on. But, okay, the one thing you're not going to get is purchase orders to ship into all of their stores. They're going to give you a little test. Okay, but here's what happens. Let's say they give you a 100 store test. Well, that's pretty exciting for you, right? And you're going to have to do a lot of ramping up just to supply those 100 stores. If that test goes well, which is what you're hoping for, what if the buyer calls and said, you know what, in 90 days, I want to roll out to 4,000 stores? How are you going to do that? So these are things that you need to think about before you even walk in the door to talk to these people. Okay, you've got to think ahead. You've got to plan ahead. How am I going to ramp up my business? Do I have the financial resources to ramp up my business? Okay, to prepare to do all of that. These are all things you're going to want to do. It can be done. You know, many years ago, I had a very small company. It was a startup we launched, and I got into Home Depot and to Walmart because it was a more of a hardware DIY product. And we got into Home Depot and into Walmart in the same year. That was challenging. It was a good problem, but it was a problem nevertheless, okay? And it really takes a lot to be able to manage that and to ramp it up. Ability to quickly scale, okay? You've got to be able to scale fast. And again, I've got to reiterate the need for cash resources. You're going to need a fair amount of cash to launch because they're not going to pay you a dime up front. Okay, it's not happening. Okay, it gets worse. Okay, listen, I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news. I'm just trying to get you to prepare so that you can be successful. These big retailers will not work with anything less than 60-day payment terms, which means you're financing 60 days worth of inventory for them. Now, you multiply that by the thousands of stores that you're getting into, make sure you can handle that. Now, there's ways around that. If you don't have the resources, if you have enough margin, you can factor your receivables. There are factoring companies that you can contact. They'll buy the accounts receivable from you and take 20%, you know, and that's just an average. But, you know, that's something you might want to do in the beginning if you don't have the resources, because it puts you in a position to be able to have cash flow. Because the minute you ship product, you got to have the resources to buy more materials and, you know, to work on replenishing your inventory. Okay, so now, this is something that I don't, you know, if you've had experience with retail, then you know this, but when you're dealing with big boxes, it is your responsibility. Your company is responsible for managing your product line in their stores. Now, that may come as a bit of a surprise. Actually, Walmart started that process many years ago. They were the first, and they started, and it was a term known as VMI, Vendor Managed Inventory. And that has evolved to where pretty much every major retailer wants you to manage the inventory in their store. They want you to maintain all of the analytics and pull from those analytics and generate reports, show what's selling, what's not, in what region, and what stores, and so forth. Okay, drilling down on a per store basis, on a per item basis. Okay, so that's something you need to do. If a product isn't moving well, okay, there's one of two things that's going to happen. I'll bring up the other bullet point too. Either they're going to come to you and tell you that they need markdown money so that they can reduce the price because they're not going to eat it. They're going to want you as the supplier to eat that. Okay, so either you're going to have to offer markdown money or they'll just want you to take the product back. So here's how I want you to think about selling to a big box retailer, okay? I want to create a different way of looking at it. I want you to think of it as renting space in their store, okay? That's how I really want you to think about that. Think about, I'm renting shelf space in Walmart. I'm renting shelf space in CVS. I'm renting shelf space in Walgreens, okay? And when you're renting the space, if your product isn't selling at the levels that they're looking for, they're going to potentially evict you as a renter, okay, and bring somebody in who's going to deliver more profit per square foot, okay, because that is the main metric that retailers use when measuring performance, okay? It's sales per square foot. you have to be prepared to be in front of those buyers on a very regular basis. Okay, they want to know that you're on top of this business, which means you'll be going in there regularly, and you're going to be going in with all of the analytics, all the statistics, because you will have access to the back room of their website. And it's password protected, so when you log into it, you can only see your own data. You can't see another company's data. When you log in, you can't see Johnson & Johnson's data, okay, or 3M's data. You're only going to be able to see your own. But the purpose for that is that they want you to do all the number crunching. They want you to see what's selling in what stores and so forth, and they want you to come in with recommendations. This particular SKU is not selling in these stores. We recommend that we pull that SKU or we mark it down. We will offer you markdown money, and here's a SKU we suggest bringing in that's become very popular, and we think you should add that SKU. So that would just be an example of what you would be doing when you go in to visit with that buyer. Now, assuming that you're okay with taking this leap, and I'm not trying to intimidate you, I'm trying to help you. Hopefully you'll say, I still want to take this leap. Because you know what? You don't grow without taking risk. Okay, that's a fact. Okay, so we've all got to be willing to take a little bit of risk, okay, if we want to enjoy that reward. So if you're saying, yes, I can do this, I want to do this, I'll get the resources I need to do this, okay, both human and capital resources, then great, let's move forward. So let's talk about the targeted customer strategy I mentioned before. Before you go and meet with a retailer, realize that every retailer is different. Okay, so what I would want you to do is go to their website. They're all public companies. Go to their website, go to the bottom of the homepage, and you'll see a little link that says Investor Relations. You click that link, and I want you to read their most recent annual report. I want you to read their 10K, which is another annual disclosure, and their quarterly reports. This is how you're really going to become familiar with all of the key numbers with that company, where they're going, what their direction is. And if you really are well read on all of those reports, when you go in to speak to that retailer, you'll be able to speak their language. And that will be impressive to them, as opposed to just winging it and going in there and not really knowing all this. Go in prepared. Make sure you've done all of your homework, okay? Because it will really be revealing for you. It's a great revelation to go through all of those reports that are public, okay? And learn about what are the right buttons to push with this company versus that company. Now, once again, if you're not a major consumer brand, okay, the issue is going to be this. If you had the good fortune to get into Target, it's unlikely Walmart will want to carry your product. Okay, in fact, 99.9% chance they won't. Why should they? Why should they have to go head on against Target when they can choose another brand? Okay, where they're not going head on. Does that make sense to everybody? So that's just, they have choices, it's because there's no brand in our nascent young industry that's got that kind of brand power, okay? And I know some people may say, well, Charlotte's Web, okay, they're probably the biggest name, okay, in what we do, but that's at a whole different level, okay, than talking about, again, brands I mentioned like Tylenol or something like that. So those are brands they have to carry. Okay, so doesn't matter. If Target's carrying Tylenol, Walmart's going to carry Tylenol. Okay, it's great to have that kind of brand equity, but when they have a choice and they're not bound to carry a particular brand, they're not going to want to carry the same brand as a direct competitor. So let me tell you what my strategy used to be when I would look to sell into big retail. I would segment the retailers into categories. I would say mass merchant. Mass merchant would be a Walmart or a Target. I would say Grocery. Now, I realize Target and Walmart carry grocery, but I classify them as mass merchants. Grocery, we're talking more like a Whole Foods or a Kroger or an Albertsons or a Safeway. I would look at the drugstore chains as a separate one, right? CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens, okay, and so forth. You get the idea. So I would target which one I want to go. If I had a choice and I could get any of them, which one would I want? And that's who I go for first, okay? And if that doesn't fly, okay, I'll go to the other one, okay? You'll know pretty fast if they're going to be willing to talk to you or not. If Walmart shuts the door on me and they were my number one choice, I'm going to go to Target. You know, same thing. If Walgreens shuts the door on me, I'm going to go to Rite Aid or CVS. So do it by channel. Don't just do it overall. Do it by channel. Break it into each channel, and that's how you should approach it. As I said, none of us in this room have the brand power in such a nascent industry like ours. Again, I mentioned this before. This is really important because this is where you have to do some real number crunching. For private label, which in some ways you could say is a better way to go, you know, frankly, I had a lot of my greatest successes going into retail by selling private label. I didn't care if it wasn't my brand. I just wanted to sell and make money. Okay, I'm sure you all feel the same way. Okay, so, but here's the real challenge about it. How do you sell them so that they can now make an 80% margin, and these are averages, okay, an 80% margin instead of a 60% margin, and their retail is still 15% below any brand that's in the store? Okay, what does that mean? It means you're going to be selling at a much lower margin. And it's going to cost you more, okay? Because for this product, for an ingestible, so if we're talking tinctures or gummies or anything that's ingested, okay, they're going to want you to carry at least a $15 million product liability insurance, okay? Because they've got huge liability by carrying your product in their store. Which goes back to why I told you you'll have to have full upstream control of your supply chain. So if you're not a vertically integrated company, okay, from seed to shelf, okay, then you are going to have to be able to have some sort of stewardship over your suppliers and your suppliers' suppliers. So I was also a clinical professor for 11 years, and I taught business. And I taught various topics, but one was supply chain. And one of the things we teach in supply chain is if you're just talking about your supplier or your customer, that's not a supply chain. When you're talking about your supplier's supplier and your supplier's supplier's supplier and your customer's customer, that's what supply chain is. It's a chain. Okay, so you're going to need to have that stewardship because you've got a lot of liability on the line here. And you want to protect yourself. Of course, they're going to want you to protect them. But more importantly, you got to protect yourself. Okay, you don't want to, you know, mess up your reputation and so forth. So, retailer access, really important. You need to actually build a relationship. Now, admittedly, it's different today than it was when I started doing business with big boxes, because back in those days, it really was all about the relationship. You know, and if you screwed up and you shipped a bad batch of products, you got slapped on the wrist. They said, "Oh, Gary, look what you did. Just please don't do this again." If you do that today, you're gone. You're out. Okay, it's not what did you do for me lately, it's what did you do for me an hour ago. That's how the big boxes think today. So, but having said that, it's really key that the secret, the real secret to getting into these boxes is getting to know the players. Okay, now, when I say get to know the players, not just the buyer, okay? You always want to have direct contact with the buyer of your product, but a top-to-top relationship is really important. So your CEO should somehow get to know the senior vice president of merchandising at the company that you're looking to sell. Oh, because that top-to-top relationship really helps. So it's really important to drive that. be prepared to discuss your strategic plan with the supplier. They're going to want to know what it is. You can't just go in there and say, I want to sell you. Okay, that's not going to work. You got to come in with a plan. What is the strategic plan for your product? Remember, they don't really care about you. They care about how much they can sell on their shelves, or off of their shelves, I should say, right? That's what they care about. They don't care about me. They don't care about you. But they'll like you, okay, if your products are generating more sales per square foot than their average. Okay, but they don't care about you in that if you're not meeting their expectations, you know, they're not worried about saying see you later. Now, in the brick and mortar space, sales per square foot, as I mentioned, is a key metric. Some look at it as sales per linear foot as opposed to square foot. But every retailer is different. And I gave you two examples. For the average for Walmart is $400 per square foot in a year per store. So it's per square foot. So in Target, it's $300 per square foot. So Target doesn't sell as much per square foot as Walmart does. These are the kinds of things you can learn by reading these reports. Okay, this is why you need to really know their business. Imagine if you can go in there and speak their language, that you know a lot about what they're doing. You know what a lot of their metrics are. They're going to see that you've taken the time to do your homework, and that's key. Okay. Again, I said this before. Think of it as renting space. I think that mentality helps because if you're renting and you don't pay your rent, you're going to be evicted. If you're renting space in the store and you're not generating revenue enough to satisfy them, you're going to get evicted. So that's why I think that's a really interesting mindset and a good way to look at this. Okay, let's talk about strategic planning and marketing for the retailer. You should be developing a 3 to 5 year category management plan. Okay, this shows the retailer that you've really given this some thought and that you've laid out an entire plan for them. Now, that's a little challenging in the industry we're in today because this industry is so nascent and so young. Things are changing and evolving so quickly, okay, especially on the regulatory and compliance side, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's important not to just come in with, here's what I want to do today, because that's not what they want to hear. Okay, they want to hear what your plan is. So you want to create a launch plan for your new items, you know, a strategy for how you're going to launch these new products. When people are in a retail store, consumers, you have 15 seconds to catch their attention on the shelf. That's it. 15 seconds. Okay, so what does that mean? It means you have to have powerful packaging. You have to have a product that stands out because you want to get their attention. Okay, it's important to engage in store clustering. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, so when we're looking at big chains, they segment their stores in what they call clusters. Okay, and so what does that mean? The clusters can be performance-based clusters and non-performance-based clusters. A performance-based cluster is based on revenue. So they will segment stores. Stores doing 45 million and up are one cluster. Stores doing 25 to 45 are another cluster. You follow what I'm saying? Stores doing 15 to 25 is another cluster. Then there are non-performance clusters that look at the size of the actual store because retailers have different size stores. It could be looking at the demographics, the geographic demographics, the geographic side, the socioeconomic demographics of that neighborhood. Okay, I mean, they'll look at all of the different demographics and lump these stores together. Okay, why? Because those are the ones that are going to perform more similarly than the ones that are different. Okay, so, and the whole idea there, this started evolving about 15 years ago because what the retailer is trying to do, because they're so big and they're national, they want to feel like a local store in your neighborhood. And they want to localize the store. They want to localize the product mix, okay, to fit whoever's shopping in that store. So that's why you engage in clustering. So make sure you can speak that language. Do some homework, okay? Be sure you can speak that language. Read about that retailer and how they work with their clusters, okay? And if you can't find that data, that's okay. What a really cool thing to do if you get that appointment is say, I'd like to know what your clustering strategy is. That'll impress them. Ask them what their clustering strategy is. Do you do performance-based clustering? Do you do non-performance-based clustering? And so forth. Merchandising and shelf placement is really critical in maximizing your sales. Now, you're not going to have really the ultimate choice in that because you're renting real estate and they're going to determine what real estate they will offer you. But as an example, when you're on a shelf, being chest high to eye level is a much better place to be than on the bottom shelf. Okay, that's just not where your eyes go when you're walking down an aisle. Okay, now you're not going to have real control over that, but you can sell it. Okay, you can sell it by, the way I would sell it is I would say, look, we're in this really rapidly evolving industry. Okay, this is growing so fast. The industry is expected to grow, what you read is tenfold in the next 5 years. That remains to be seen, but those are the numbers we're hearing, right? We really want to be because consumers are reading about CBD, they're seeing it on TV. Okay, this is something where you want high visibility. It's up to you to try to sell them. So there's a lot of ways to do that because they're not going to give you the premium space that an established brand has that's getting the $400 or $500 per square foot. They're not going to risk that. Okay, but what you might get is maybe for a short period of time, a little introductory end cap. Okay, which by the way, you pay for. Okay, forgot to mention that. Okay, if you want to, there's something called slotting fees. Okay, and you're going to have to pay for that. Marketing and promotional plans. You've got to come in with your whole marketing and promotional plan for your products. Sales forecasting. Remember what I told you, you're driving this business. Okay, you're driving it. So you're the one who has to bring that up. So you have to have a business development plan. You have to have a cross-channel strategy. So what does that mean? Well, all those retailers also sell online. So that's what we call omni-channel. Omni-channel means your product is being sold through multiple channels by that particular retailer. So you have to come up with an omni-channel strategy for them. Cross-merchandising in various aisles. If you have a particular product that's for pain, okay, well, it could go in a few locations in that store. Think about it. Okay, drill down and see if you can get a few locations for that product. Retail account management. So it's not just about developing the strategic plan. Now you have to execute on that plan, right? The strategic plan's great, but if you don't execute on it, you're not going to be successful. So we've got to create that plan for execution. The promotional planning element is critical. You must excel at meeting strategy. What do I mean by that? If you get an appointment with a buyer, their time's valuable. Okay, be prepared. Manage the time in that meeting effectively. Okay. Be prepared to handle all administrative details and paperwork because they're not going to do it. They're going to have you do all that, okay, as the vendor. Exceptional service is key. Let me tell you what the metrics generally are these days. Your fill rate when you ship an order to these big boxes better be a minimum of 95%, preferably 98% or more, okay? If you're below 95% on a frequent basis, you're not going to last. Why? Because stockouts are lost sales for them. Lost sales for them are lost profits for them. Not only for the company, but for your buyer, because that's how they're paid. Okay, they're paid a salary, plus they're paid a bonus based on the profit contribution their department made. So they don't tolerate that. So be sure, that's why I said, be sure you have the financial capability and the ability to scale, because you're going to want to ship complete and on time every order. That's your goal. Category management. There's going to be line reviews. So, if you're in for a year, they're going to do a line review probably once a year. And then competitors are going to try to come in. So you've got to stay competitive. Strategic selling. Be strategic about what you want to sell them. Talk to them about their marketing strategy. How can you help support them with their marketing strategy? What about pricing and assortment optimization? You need to talk with them about that. And I said about exceptional service. That's just, I could say that 10 times and it wouldn't be enough. Okay, that is key with these folks. Develop and execute your best promotional practices for that retailer. Develop merchandising strategies for that retailer. And remember what I said to you, that's different in every retailer. Every one of them is different. Develop optimum planograms for each cluster. I already taught you what clustering is. Okay, so now you've got to come up with a mix, a product mix or a planogram for each cluster. If you know what the demographics are for each of those clusters, then you can come up with the best mix for them. Supply chain, daily forecasting. You've got to be able to do forecasting by segment and by store. Replenishment and inventory management. You've got to be on top of that to ship 100% complete. Supply chain integration. Now, here's what I want to tell you about that. That's when you work with your upstream suppliers so that it's all integrated and all transparent, because that's what they're going to want to see. Okay, now, the future for this is blockchain technology. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, and I'm not going to really get into a lot of detail, but essentially, blockchain technology puts a time and date stamp over every single step in the process that can be traced and tracked. So you're going to want to implement that with your supply chain partners upstream. So if you are a packager and bottler of retail product, you're going to want to integrate with your supplier of CBD coming from your processor. Okay, also with the farm. Okay, so every time somebody buys one product off the shelf, you can literally trace what acre on the farm that came from, when that was harvested, okay, when it was extracted, what the COA looked like, okay, all the way through. This is where the future is in all industries. And I came out of supply chain. This is huge. Blockchain technology. It's going to be impacting this industry too. So get ahead of the game. Okay. Internet of Things, IoT. I'm sure you've read about that. Okay. We're using the internet today, and we're using all of the advanced technology that we have with automation, okay, to make things seamless in the supply chain. So you want to automate all your data collection and management, and this lowers your operating costs in the long term. So it's going to cost you money to ramp up to do this, but once you do it, it's going to be so much more efficient for you. Okay, last thing, and then we'll be done, and if there's any time, we can take some questions. Reporting and analytics. You're going to have to be delivering a scorecard. Basically, you're handing your customer a report card on yourself. Okay, and you're going to, every time you meet with them, you're going to be handing them that scorecard, and you're going to be showing SKU performance, okay, and that SKU performance and sell-through analysis will be by cluster, by store, by product, any way you want to slice it and dice it. You will have that information for them, okay. POS, point of sale, okay, point of sale reporting and tracking. So you're tracking everything being sold out of that store. There's something called market baskets. What do people buy when they shop in that store and they buy your product? See, we can track all of that. Okay, so when they bought your CBD tincture, what else was in that shopping cart on that particular sales ticket? The retailers have that information and you have access to it. What's great about that? If you continually see a similar product coming up that's being bought by consumers with yours, what a great place to cross-merchandise your product right next to that product. Does everybody follow me? This is where, data and information is so powerful. Okay. We got a couple minutes for questions if anybody has any. Yes, sir.
Do you have to disclose to the big box if you're selling to another? Or do they do a background check on that kind of stuff?
Look, my philosophy in doing business with big boxes is always be transparent because they're going to find out. If you think they're not shopping their competitors' stores, you're wrong. No, they're shopping. They're in there all the time. Yes, sir.
Can you, when you ask a question, can you ask it in the microphone if we're recording this? Thank you.
Is there a POS system you suggest using?
No, the POS system is the retailer's system.
Oh, okay.
Okay, point of sale is the retailer's system. My first job when I was 16 years old was I was a front cashier for a Rite Aid store. Well, those are the old days. I had to figure out how much change to give the customer. The machine didn't tell you how much change to give. Okay, but now everything's point of sale. Everything's tracked. Inventory, you name it, by point of sale. So that's the retailer's POS system. Yes, sir.
What on average are the terms or conditions of payment with big box retailers?
60 days minimum. Some will ask you for 90. And again, I said every retailer is different. If you look at a Costco, for example, and everybody's been in a warehouse club before. So when you go into those wholesale clubs, you notice how things come in on pallets. Okay, well, guess what? That pallet of product better turn really fast or that pallet's going back to your facility. Okay, so sometimes you have to turn down a sale. And I don't have time to tell you my war stories because I got a bunch of them. But sometimes if you really feel strongly that a product is not going to sell through, even if the buyer likes it, you better think about that. Because if you spend the money and invest in all of that product going in and then you've got to take it back, that could really hurt your bottom line. Yes, sir.
Towards the beginning, you were talking about customizing your potential product line, the look of it towards the individual retailer or cluster. Were you talking literally creating packaging that is more suited towards that particular retailer, whether it be a CVS or like a Walgreens or a Walmart?
So what I'm talking about is wherever your business is today. So, and everybody's is different. But I would say that the vast majority of retail CBD companies started by D2C, direct-to-consumer, selling online. I think most of you would agree with that. Okay, so what I'm saying is think about possibly changing to a different package for the retail stores. And when you do, think about what that packaging should look like. And I would actually recommend using an external graphics firm that's got experience with big box retailers who understand what the look and the feel should be in the health and beauty care department of that store. Not in the toy department, not in the clothing department, but literally in the space you would be in, that health and beauty care section of the store. I mean, even the drugstore chains are not all, supplements and painkillers, right? So just in that area of the store, who has the expertise in packaging? Anybody else?
So from the grower side, I was wondering, besides blockchain technology, is there anything else a grower should integrate into their harvest or anything to help this whole process?
Well, I mean, when we think about what the retailer's looking for, so as a grower, I mean, you're pretty much at the top of the supply chain, right? There's the seeds and you're growing, and so it's all about efficacy for them. It's going to all be about efficacy, your expertise, and the quality and the precision of what you do, because they're going to research all of that. They're not going to put their reputation on the line. So you just have to make sure that you're completely buttoned up and that you're ready to play in the big leagues. It's really what it comes down to.
When it comes to retailer education, and ensuring that staff are educated. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that seems to be a big challenge with staff turnover. What tools to bring? Is there room for marketing tools, postcards, brochures, shelf sort of tags?
That's a really great question. I mean, what I would recommend is coming up with collateral materials that if you get that business, that you can distribute to the stores so that the staff can learn more about, what is CBD, what does it do, what's it about. Now, keep in mind that today, retail stores are different than they were many years ago. It's pretty much all self-service, right? I mean, when you walk into any of these big stores, nobody's coming up to you saying, "May I help you?" Okay, I mean, when's the last time you heard that? Okay, so there's not going to be less of that, but you definitely want them to be knowledgeable. Okay, I would come up with ways to educate them, and one way you could do it is with webinars. Okay, you could offer webinars. Okay, for the store managers and the pharmacists and so forth. So that's a really good way to do it. It's probably one of the least expensive ways to do it. And a lot of these retailers already have the technology to do these things. Okay, but that would be a great way to do it.
We need to wrap it up. One more question that works.
How effective are product demos in a big box chain? Like, back in the day, people would do free samples and all that.
Yeah. As you guys have all noticed, because you're all consumers like me, you just don't see that anymore other than in a Costco or a Sam's Club. That's where you see most of that, and most of that's with food products. It's not common anymore. What you do see in stores are these continuous tapes that run, well, it's not tape anymore, it's digital, right, of like a video that explains the product. But now you're getting into some really pricey stuff, okay? It's expensive. They charge you for everything. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, we want to be able to educate the consumer, I agree, because the consumer is uneducated when it comes to CBD for the most part. But that's just what we have to deal with in a very nascent and evolving industry. I mean, I think you're limited. Okay, I guess I'm supposed to stop now, so thank you. It's been a pleasure talking with you.